Amen. Thank you so much, worship team. As we continue our new series this morning leading up to Easter, again, if you can believe it, it's just a few weeks away. I just want to start with another reminder that the story over the next several weeks, the story that we have heard most of our lives, is wrapped up around people, real people. Described by author Daniel Darling as the villains, heroes, cowards, and crooks who witnessed history's biggest miracle. I love that description. I'm actually taking much inspiration for this series from his book titled The Characters of Easter. Well, what I want us to see is these are not just one-dimensional names on the pages of the Bible. Again, this story that we've read so many times, we've heard so many times, these are real people with hopes and dreams and decisions to be made, cast by God in the greatest story ever told. What was it like for them? What were their thoughts? What were their emotions? What were their motivations? And I think if we look closely enough at this cast of characters, we're going to find so much of our story in their story. And hopefully that's going to maybe bring some caution into our lives, but also just reveal more and more about who Jesus is and the importance of the Passion as we get closer and closer to Easter. Last week we looked at the religious leaders frustrated in their attempts to publicly discredit Jesus. They finally give up on that plan. We've tried everything. We have tried our very best efforts to make this guy look bad. We've been accusing him and persecuting him and trying to make him look bad, discredit him in front of all the people, but it hasn't worked. So we're giving up on that plan, and they began looking for ways to secretly arrest him and have him killed. If you can believe it. These are the top guys, the most spiritual guys of first century Judaism, and they have totally missed Jesus. And actually, they're trying to kill him now. After Lazarus is raised from the dead in John chapter 11, it says, so from that day on, they plotted to take his life. Can you imagine what those conversations must have been like behind closed doors? Luke chapter 22 reports, now the feast of unleavened bread drew near, which is called the Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to put him to death, for they feared the people. This guy's popularity is soaring. We have got to nip this in the bud. We've got to do something, and we've got to do something now. 2 days before the Passover, the Last Supper, Matthew chapter 26 tells us, then the chief priest and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, this big, opulent, palatial estate. Here are all these guys dressed up in their best church clothes. And they're in the palace of Caiaphas. Verse 4 says, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. All the Gospels are telling us the same thing. They're plotting, they're scheming. The religious leaders are done playing games with Jesus. They are determined to silence him permanently. But how? How are we going to do it? About a week before, the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should come and report it to them so that they could arrest him. So they've already sent word out. They've got spies. They're looking for a way to find him and arrest him, but not out in the open. We don't want to do it out in the open because we don't want to cause a riot. And to their surprise, an accomplice emerged, not from the crowds or from their own ranks, but from Jesus' inner circle. The 12 guys that he had chosen to be his disciples. A guy named Judas Iscariot. How could this happen? He's one of the 12. I mean, really, have you ever stopped to think about how could this have happened to one of the 12? Judas was a disciple of Jesus. He was chosen by Jesus to be a part of his earthly ministry. Like the others, listen, I was talking to some guys this morning, Steve and John, in my office. We tend to kind of just gloss over this part of the story. He left everything to follow Jesus. He left it all. He left whatever he was doing in his previous life, his family, his livelihood, to follow Jesus for 3 years. We forget about that. Darling says, we gloss over this as we read the gospel narratives as if to be a disciple in those days was as simple as a twice-a-month visit to an air-conditioned building and the singing of a few worship songs. I mean, that's maybe our definition. But that wasn't what was happening in the first century. To follow Jesus was a radical move. I'm putting all of my hopes and trust into who this guy says he is. Imagine spending 3 years of your life doing anything. I spent 3 years of my life, my younger years, in South America. I left my family. I was away from family. I was away from my relationship with Meredith. She'll tell you all about that. I didn't know the language when I first got there. I was the only missionary in the state that I was in, hundreds of miles away from any other American, serving by myself as a missionary in this foreign country where I'm barely speaking the language for 3 years. And I'm telling you, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Because God says, you know what? If you'll give up your life for me, my goodness, I will give you everything that you need. And that's exactly what he did for me for those 3 years. I had family and friends and church. I saw the Spirit of God move. It was amazing. Was it scary? Sure. But it was unbelievable. Probably some of the best years of my life. Here's Judas, 3 years of his life, not a spectator. He's not in the crowds. He's a follower. He's one of the 12 apostles who was empowered by Jesus for ministry. Let's go back to Luke chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, and then verse 6. One day, Jesus called together his 12 disciples, not 11. He didn't exclude Judas here in these verses. He called together his 12 disciples and gave them power and authority to cast out all demons and to heal all diseases. Then he sent them out to tell everyone about the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. Verse 6. So they began their circuit of the villages, preaching the good news and healing the sick. Think about it. Judas is proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. He's out there doing it. He's empowered by Jesus himself. He's healing the sick. How many of y'all have ever healed the sick? He's healing the sick. How many people turned to Christ because of his preaching? Imagine what Judas saw in his 3 years with Jesus, traveling all over Israel. The lame walk. The blind see, the dead are raised, people are freed from demonic possession. He was there and participated in the feeding of the 5,000. He's one who's picking up the leftovers. He's one carrying a basket of leftovers. He was there when the wind and the waves were quieted just with the words that Jesus spoke. He met the woman at the well. He was there. He heard Jesus deliver the Sermon on the Mount, perhaps the greatest sermon, perhaps the best sermon ever given. He was there. He saw it live. He wasn't just a spectator. He's a participant. Side by side with Jesus, doing ministry in the name of Jesus. From the outside looking in, by all appearances, you'd be convinced that there were few people as all in as Judas. Even the other disciples saw Judas this way. They had so much faith and trust in this man that they made him their treasurer, right? Do you pick the shady guy in the group to be your treasurer? No, you pick the person that you trust the most. He's going to be the one in charge of the money. We trust him. We respect him. He's managing the books for this fledgling movement. So before we get to the betrayal, this was kind of, I needed to camp out here some this week. I hope that we skip this a lot of times in our thoughts about Judas. So before we get to the bad part, we need to remember him in these days. See him in this light as the friend, as the fellow disciple, as the follower of Jesus. The truth is, we don't really know what motivated him to turn on Jesus. We're going to get some context clues as we read the story today. But while the betrayal narrative actually happens in a short period of time, here's what has to be true. His heart had been turning toward betrayal long before this. Chuck Swindoll reminds us that nobody suddenly becomes villainous and corrupt. Isn't that the truth? Nobody just from one day to the next becomes this evil kind of a person. It takes time. It's a process, he says. One step leads to another, which in turn leads the person deeper, which in turn leads the person still deeper, which leads to the act itself that goes down in infamy. Isn't that Judas? This act, this betrayal that has gone down in infamy. Said another way, everything big starts small. Right? Our thoughts start turning, and then we start taking the steps, and then what starts happening? Our hearts begin to harden, and before we know it, we're far away. We could be in really close proximity, like Judas was to Jesus physically, but we're going to see that eventually his heart was far away. That said, let's pick back up in Matthew chapter 26. Remember, we just read those first few verses. The religious leaders, they're in the palace of Caiaphas, and they're scheming, they're plotting. How are we going to take Jesus out? Verse 6, let's pick up a few verses later in verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, so he has now moved from really kind of hiding, and now he's in Bethany, which is just a couple of miles away from Jerusalem. He's now in the home of a leper that he has healed. Now, some people think this could have been a close relative of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, or just really a really close friend. And so now he is in the home of this man, Simon. Verse 7, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. And John is going to tell us that actually was Mary, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. See, this kind of perfume was costly. It was precious. It was kept sealed in this alabaster container that could only be opened by breaking it so that it would remain pure and unspoiled. The text in John said it was worth about 300 denarii, which in today's money would be somewhere between $18,000 and $50,000. This perfume, this precious perfume. Now, I've never seen a bottle of perfume that expensive, and if you have, please don't tell my wife about it. But she just breaks it open and pours it out on Jesus' hair, and John tells us, and also on his feet. Now, verse 8, the disciples object. They are indignant. Is that a strong word? Would you consider that? That's a strong word, okay? It doesn't say they were upset. They are indignant with what has just happened. Verse 9, this perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Now notice verse 8 says they. Is that plural? That's plural. All right, this is all the disciples. They were indignant. John's gospel kind of points out that Judas is the one who says the words. All right? So, but according to Matthew, it's the common consensus for the group. Have you ever been in a group like that? You're all thinking the same thing, but you just need one spokesperson, and you find the brave one to kind of speak up and say what everybody else is thinking. That's pretty much what's happening, right? Matthew says they're all thinking it. John tells us Judas is the one who actually said it. He says what they're all thinking out loud. So with the benefit of hindsight, John gives us Judas's objection in John chapter 12, verses 5 and 6. That perfume was worth a year's wages. It should have been sold and the money given to the poor. Now look at verse 6 again. This is hindsight. None of the disciples suspected Judas at the time. They had no idea. These words were written many years later, looking back on what happened. Verse 6. John says, not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief. And since he was in charge of the disciples' money, he often stole some for himself. Now, that's a damning statement, isn't it? So let's go back to Matthew 26. They've just objected to what Mary has done. Verse 10 says, aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? Leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. I love how one writer summed up this last verse, verse 13. He said, one day you'll be telling, this is kind of a paraphrase of what Jesus could have been saying. One day you'll be telling the story of my death and resurrection to the whole world, and you will recount how dull you were and how perceptive she was. How you didn't understand what was happening, how dull you were, but how perceptive Mary was. Jesus takes Mary again. Remember the time that she had chosen better and sat at the Lord's feet when Martha was just kind of busy with activity? And Mary chose to just be in the presence of Jesus. She had chosen what was better. And so here she is again. Jesus takes Mary, a woman who is really relegated to kind of second status, and he elevates her to main character status. This is going to be remembered for perpetuity, what she has done. How much love she felt. Watch the transition here after Jesus corrects Judas and the others. Verse 14. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? He's had enough. He's seen enough. This was the last straw. What are you willing to give me if I tell you where he is? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. The price of a slave. Anywhere from between $400 and $500 just to a few $1,000s. Is that a life-changing sum and amount? Contrast that with what has just happened. This woman, Mary, who has broken this bottle of perfume, a year's wages, to show Jesus that he's worthy. And here we have Judas and the religious leaders offering the legal value of a slave's life for Jesus to be handed over. Don't miss that contrast. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over. Remember, these leaders wanted to arrest Jesus privately. They needed to know where he went to be alone. Where were his private hideouts to escape from the noise and the crowds? Where he was when he was spending time praying to the Father. Judas was on the inside. He knew. He knew where Jesus would be. Let's continue in Matthew 26. Meanwhile, Jesus and his disciples have found a private place to celebrate the Passover, and Judas joins back up with them. This chapter is full of good stuff. Matthew 26. When it was evening, picking up in verse 20, when it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12. While they were eating, he said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. Now, look at verse 22. Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, am I the one, Lord? Why would they do that if they already knew who it was? When Jesus said somebody would betray him, they didn't all look at each other and say, oh, we know who it is. We've suspected him all along. Obviously, it's Judas. Nobody did that. When Jesus tells them somebody's going to betray him, they all start to look around and they all start asking themselves, oh no, is it me? Could it be me? Verse 23, Jesus replied, one of you who has just eaten from this bowl with me will betray me. Oh, we've all eaten from the bowl. For the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born. Now, Judas knows the deal he's already made. He's sitting there at the table. Can you imagine his heart rate right now, hearing those words from Jesus? Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, Rabbi, am I the one? And Jesus told him, you have said it. Now, with all the conversation going on at the table, this guys, do y'all know how guys are? Do we pay really good attention to what's happening a lot of times? Listen, this is going down. Jesus says, yeah, you're the one to Judas, but none of the other guys even realize what's happening. They don't even know. John tells us that Jesus even gave Judas the bread dipped in the bowl, but no one understood what was happening. He actually gets up and he gets up and leaves the room, and all the other disciples are like, "Oh, Judas must be going to buy some more stuff." Yeah. Because he has the money, right? He's got the credit card. Jesus has just gone and sent him to buy just a few. We've ran out of bread, so he's going to buy more bread, right? We were all dipping it in the bowl. So he's gone out. He leaves to find the religious leaders. That's where he's going. And the soldiers that are going to ambush Jesus in just a short amount of time. Now, here's what we need to understand. Matthew shows us that all of the disciples have the same reaction of disgust when the woman pours out the perfume on Jesus' feet. When Jesus tells the disciples that someone will betray him, he doesn't say, we've got a traitor in our midst, and there he is. Jesus is basically saying, one of you is going to sell me out for the right price. Is it you? Look into your hearts. All of you, look into your hearts. One of you is going to sell me out. Is it you? They understood the question because look how shaky and scary their response is. They're greatly distressed. They're all asking, is it me? Am I the one? It's not me, is it? Listen, Jesus goes on to tell them just a few verses later in verse 31, it's not just one of you who are going to sell me out. Listen to what he says. This very night you will all fall away on account of me. This is just a few verses later. All of you are going to desert me. They may not have sold Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, but none of them are going to go all the way with Jesus. They all have a price, a line where they will walk away from Jesus. Judas did it most brazenly, but they're all going to do it in just a couple of hours. Peter, the most outspoken of the group, is going to deny that he even knows the man 3 times, calling down curses from heaven. So we have to ask ourselves this morning, what's our price? What is our price? Maybe you're willing to follow Jesus when it's convenient, but at what point do you stop? Maybe you downplay your commitment to Jesus in front of your friends and family because you want to fit in. You don't want to look bad. You don't want to get made fun of. Maybe it's an area of your life you just don't want to let God have control of yet. You're convicted. You're convicted, but you're resisting. I don't want to give up that habit. I don't want to give up this relationship, this sinful compromise. Maybe you work too much and neglect your family. Maybe He's calling you to put Him first in your finances, the way you use your time, your resources. Maybe He's calling you to stop playing the church game and go all in. You know you should, but you don't because you like the freedoms that come with being non-committal. See, I can be close to Jesus when I want to, but then I love the freedom just to be able to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. Your commitment to Jesus stops at inconvenience. Whatever it is, that's your price. That's my price. Where your commitment stops and you sell them out. Listen, we all have one. And no, not me, Don. And Jordan so graciously pointed us on Friday back to Peter when we start to feel that way. Remember what he said to Jesus? Oh, Jesus, I would never deny you. Even if I have to die for you, man, you can count on me. I'll never walk away from you, even if I have to die. We know what happened just a few hours later. Paul warns us in 1 Corinthians 10:12, listen, take heed lest ye fall. All of us have a point where we're willing to walk away. Jesus has been nothing but loyal to us, but for the right price, we abandon Him. Maybe not for 30 pieces of silver, but the stuff in our hearts is the same. So we got to ask ourselves today, what is our price? We also have to answer the question, why would Judas do what he did? Why would he do this? All signs point to greed and really disillusionment, unmet expectations. He was disappointed with Jesus. Judas had expectations about the Messiah that Jesus didn't meet. Why isn't he leading this like so many others? Why isn't he leading this resistance and overthrowing our Roman oppressors? What's the problem here, Jesus? You have the power. I've seen it. You could do it. You could do whatever you want to do. Why aren't you overthrowing these guys who have their thumb on us? Did Judas preach the kingdom of God as the vehicle for just political victory? Is that what he's interested in? Was he following Jesus in pursuit of his own social and personal desires? Listen, I want to be a power player in this new movement. Wasn't that the attitude of a lot of the disciples? You remember when they were arguing over who was going to be the greatest? A couple of them even sent their mama to Jesus. Hey, go talk to him about making us the greatest. Let us sit on either side when he comes into power. You don't know what you're talking about. Was Judas thinking those same thoughts? Yes, I'm in at the start of this movement. I can be a power player in this new movement. They're all arguing over who's the greatest, and then Jesus is going to talk about the greatest among you has to be a slave. What? If you want to be first, you got to be last? What? What is that? We know from John that he loved money. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. He skimmed off the top. Did he care most about the potential for the balance sheet? What an outrageous waste pouring out that perfume was. To the bottom line, this movement needs money to grow, to last, but the money bag keeps getting lighter, and Jesus keeps making all the wrong moves for someone who was supposed to take power. Why are you attacking you're attacking the religious leaders instead of our Roman oppressors? What are you doing? Instead of embracing the crowds, riding the wave into earthly power, he pulls back, he steps back. Listen to John chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, the amazing miracle where he fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who has come into the world. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. Yeah, finally, let's make this guy king. He's got the power. And Jesus withdraws. Was Judas thinking, what are you doing? I left everything. I've poured myself into this movement and you're just throwing it away. Just a few verses later in John chapter 6, Jesus is thinning out the crowds. He's not interested in more numbers. He's thinning them out. He's saying really difficult, hard stuff to understand. Verse 66, from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. What he's saying is too difficult. It's too hard. And so they're leaving. They're walking away. And so Jesus says, you don't want to leave too, do you? Asking the 12. Are y'all going to leave too? Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. Then Jesus replied, have I not chosen you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. Verse 71, he meant Judas. Again, hindsight, he meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, who though one of the 12 was later to betray him. Why would this be injected into this story here in John chapter 6? I think it tells us about what was going through. Jesus knows what's happening in our hearts and our minds. See, we think, we can get away from him. We can do no, he's always there. He knows our motivations. He knows our hearts and our minds. He knows that Judas is a devil. What's going on in his heart? Jesus was refusing the kingdom that Judas wanted: money, power, position. In this withdrawal from the people, in this spilled perfume, there's no upside, there's no profit margin. Jesus is no longer a useful revolutionary. For Mary, this woman who anointed Jesus, her act served one purpose: to declare love for Jesus and to just show how worthy he was, to put love on display. You are worthy. For Judas, Jesus was a means to an end. If I follow Jesus, he'll give me what I want. For Mary, knowing him was the richest. Judas thought of Jesus as useful, as a helpful tool to obtain what he wanted. How often is that us? Come bless me, Jesus. That's why I'm following you. Come bless me, my health, my career, my plans. Bless me with money and status so that I can have more. A title, a well-funded bank account, a large home, an expensive car, vacations, convenience, comfort, so that I can be happy. Jesus, I'm following you because you're useful. For Mary, Jesus was just worthy. He's the Son of God. He has the words of life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Where else am I going to go? The question becomes, which one are you this morning? Are you more like Judas or are you more like Mary? If you really want to know, how do you respond when life disappoints you? God, this is hard. This might not be my preference. It may hurt like crazy, but if you can use this to help me know you more, if you can use this for your glory, to help others know you, I'll take it because knowing you is a better treasure than an easy life. That's the Mary mindset. But if you get angry with God and say, God, you are not keeping up your end of the deal. If you don't start giving me what I want, health, a boyfriend, a raise, whatever, then you're not worth following. Then we may be more like Judas this morning than we'd like to admit. Jesus is a means to an end for us. I have a feeling that some of us are at the crossroads today. Things are going wrong in your life. Times are hard. You feel confused, maybe even angry at God. The psalmist so often felt that way. In Psalm chapter 73, he almost slipped. And you're asking, Jesus, are you really worth following? And I'm going to tell you today, he is, but not because of the things you can get from him in this life, but because of who he is. He's worthy. He is worthy of our greatest offering, of our greatest sacrifice. All that we have, all that we are, broken at his feet. I'm yours. It's yours. My life, my time, my energy, my money, my resources, my gifts, it's all yours because you are worthy. Judas represents a religious approach to God. I serve him to get things from him. I expect to be rewarded for my behavior. Mary understands the gospel. I deserve nothing, but God has given me everything in Jesus. And Jesus is a treasure worth losing everything else for. And Jesus praises Mary. The praise that she gets is incredible. Her sacrifice meant so much that Jesus makes her story a permanent fixture of the gospel that will forever symbolize what responding to the gospel looks like. Tell her story forever. The verdict on Judas is devastating. Verse 24 says, it would be better for him if he had not been born. That means he's in hell. Judas is in hell today. His eternal condition is so bad that it would have been better for him never to have existed in the first place. That's what Jesus says. As we close, Judas is a cautionary tale for us this morning. Being in the company of Jesus, of other disciples, doesn't mean that you're saved. Close proximity to Jesus doesn't mean you're saved. It doesn't necessarily mean commitment. Worship attendance, church membership, charitable acts, even ministry participation doesn't make you right with God. Listen to Jesus in Matthew chapter 7. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord. Tell me if this sounds like Judas in Luke chapter 9. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles. That's exactly what Judas was doing when Jesus sent out the 12. Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. So you were in close proximity, but your heart was far away. Away from me, you evildoers. Salvation doesn't come through religious activity. It comes through faith and love. It comes through life-changing, fruit-producing relationship with Jesus. Judas, sadly, didn't make it to Resurrection Sunday. His story ends in despair. Overwhelmed by his sin, he returns the 30 pieces of silver. And you know what he hears from the religious leaders? Matthew 27:4 tells us. What's that to us? That's on you. That's on you. That's your problem, not ours. That Judas was failed by the religious system that should have brought him closer to God. These same religious leaders that paid him off had nothing to do with him at his lowest and darkest moment. That's not our problem. I wonder if in that moment Judas remembered Jesus washing his feet. That's what true love looks like. In his despair, Judas hanged himself. He died before Jesus did. While both Peter and Judas failed Jesus, Peter experienced redemption, while Judas was overcome with sorrow and regret. He couldn't live with what he had done. I love what Max Lucado wrote about the hill of regret. He said, at the trail's end, there are two trees. One is weathered and leafless. It's dead, but still sturdy. Its bark is gone, leaving smooth wood bleached white by the years. The twigs and buds no longer sprout. Only bare branches fork from the trunk. On the strongest of these branches is tied a hangman's noose. It was here that Judas dealt with his failure. If only Judas had looked at the adjacent tree. It's also dead. Its wood is also smooth, but there is no noose tied to its crossbeam. No more death on this tree. One was enough. One death for all. Let me pray for you today.